Hello everyone. Greetings to all from Iyer Ecological Solutions. Iyer is a leading environmental advisory firm in India with expertise in natural resource conservation, climate change mitigation, and adaptation. I am Dr. Premvada Bagadia, Senior Manager under the Research and Consultancy Wing, specializing in landscape ecology and ecosystem services valuations. Before proceeding with the panel introduction, I would take a quick moment to introduce the project Integrated Assessment of Land-Based Interventions for Strategic Mitigation and Economic Sustainability. The aim of this assessment is to draw an evidence-backed strategic roadmap for implementation of land-based mitigation interventions. In our past dialogues, we have tried finding answers to some pertinent questions on the contextual appropriateness of land-based mitigation, their connectedness with human well-being, and hindrances, if any, in terms of policy, finance, capacity, and technology. We have discussed the role of multiple stakeholder partnerships, how communities can best be onboarded into these projects, the roles of forestry and grassland sectors in LBM, the various co-benefits of LBM, be it air quality improvement, habitat connectivity, or community livelihood enhancement. In our very last webinar, we have also discussed the power of storytelling in capturing climate perspectives with eminent journalists. And in today's dialogue, we are happy to bring together professionals from the communications pillar, in which we will discuss how creative communications can ensure an accurate translation of the technical climate concepts into actionable and culturally relevant stories. I take the pleasure of welcoming all of you to this panel. In this panel, we have with us Ms. Avantika Shrivastava. Avantika has over 14 years of experience in strategic communications. She is currently leading strategic communications for Climate Group in India to drive climate action. She started her career as a journalist with the Press Trust of India and has worked with the Center for Policy Research, Oxfam, and Doctors Without Borders. She's been a participant of the Swedish Institute Leader Lab training program. We welcome you, Ms. Avantika. We have with us Ms. Paridhi Jain. She is a communications professional with over a decade of experience in wildlife research, conservation, journalism, and development communication. She's worked with Wildlife Institute of India, BNHS, UNDP, UNFPA, and currently she serves as a communications associate with UNHCR. She is passionate about using creative, people-centered storytelling to bridge conservation and climate action. We welcome you to the panel, Paridhi. We have with us Ms. Jananni Rajan Iyer. She is a strategic communications professional specializing in energy and sustainability. She's worked for organizations such as the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, Renew, Smart Power India, and TERI. She's a keen advocate for climate communications. We welcome you to the panel, Ms. Jananni. We have with us Ms. Ankita Gambhir, who is a development communications professional with over 6 years of experience leading storytelling, content strategy, and brand communication across national health and social impact programs. She has worked with the Hans Foundation, PSI Samagra, and Brook India. Welcome to the panel, Ms. Ankita. We have with us Ms. Nayanika Dutta, who is a communications and conservation professional at the Balipara Foundation. She leads forums and digital communications that drive the vision of integrating ecology with economy to build sustainable futures across the Eastern Himalayas. Welcome to the panel, Ms. Nayanika. To moderate this discussion, in this panel, we have with us Ms. Kamakshi Luthra. Kamakshi supports the communication initiatives at Iyer, and with over 5 years of experience, she brings expertise in media and policy advocacy, stakeholder outreach, digital media, and development communications. At Iyer, she uses this perspective to build communication strategies, create content for different platforms, and supports efforts that connects Iyer's work with partners, communities, and the wider public. Welcome, Kamakshi, to the panel, and now it's over to you.
A very warm welcome to everyone who has joined us today for the 10th episode of the ongoing land-based mitigation series we're having at Iyer. As we just heard, this session is about understanding how to translate complex climate science into something in a language that is more easy for people to connect with, to act upon, and even lead. We have all seen how heavy climate conversations are when it comes to jargons or the data part. But somewhere in that process, we tend to lose the human part of it. So today, we are joined by an incredible panel of people who work at the intersection of storytelling, research, and impact. And through each of their work across these years, we will together explore how communication itself can be a form of climate action. So let's start. Avantika, let's start with you. So,
Thank you.
Avantika, yeah, there is often a gap between what climate policies actually intend to do and what people actually perceive out of them. From your experience working in this domain, how do you think communication can bridge that gap and make the message more meaningful for people? Over to you.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much for having me here. And uh, this is a really important conversation to have for many reasons. And just if I focus in on your question, climate policy came out of also scientific evidence that the world that we live in is changing, the planet is changing. And then slowly when it started to trickle out, we also saw um, back and forth on, is this accurate, is this not accurate, is this really happening? And what I draw from all of those experiences is the point that climate, any kind of climate communication has to be very relatable. When it comes to policies, for instance, policies are technical documents meant for policymakers, for decision taking, meant for decision takers who would need that kind of data and that kind of inroads and insights. But that is not necessarily the case for you and me, for instance, who feel that we are far removed from climate change. It really does not affect us. We don't know the specifics of it. We don't know to what extent our lives are shaped by climate change. And that's where I feel that communications can come in, where, and you yourself said it, we're a bridge. We're a bridge that people can cross to understand what is happening around them, to understand why it is important to engage with climate change in the first place. And very frankly, we as people, if you come to think of it, we are not going to pay attention to something that we feel might not be as relatable to us. In the daily rush of things, there are 10,000 other priorities. If we think that that's not a priority, we will not attend to it most likely. And so that's the role of communications. How do you make something that is so layered, so nuanced? How do you make it accessible? How do you make it relatable? How do you make it or present it in a way that makes me as a reader, as an audience, interested to know more, to engage more? And that's where I feel climate communicators also come in.
Ritika. But when you say trying to build that content which connects with people, I mean today I feel we are in an era of short form of communication. And do you think that short form of communication is actually helping us in climate action? Because do you feel it captures the depth of the understanding of that entire issue?
Yeah, that's a very pertinent question. And believe me, I don't have an answer to that, but I can attempt it because these are the kind of conversations we have within our teams almost every day. Short form content definitely does have its place. You can't have many pages of information and knowledge that nobody is accessing. As I said in my previous comment, we are in a day and age where information is abundant. There is also so much information, so much knowledge, and so much contrary knowledge. For somebody, climate change is perhaps not even a thing, or for somebody other, it is a hoax. And for people like us, it is here and it is happening. So you see the enormous amount of complexity there. But I do feel that contrary to many opinions, the short form content is taking away from the depth of climate knowledge. I don't think that's the case. I think we're looking at this issue from an incorrect lens, if I may say that. Short form content is a tool. You can use it as you would want, as smartly as you want. So the problem to me is not short form content. It is how it is used in the hands of communicators and what they would want to communicate through that short form content. Because there are other things where I would not be using a short form content to, for instance, go to a decision taker. It doesn't work like that. But if I would want to generate awareness, then I will not use maybe a policy brief or an issue brief or something that is more detailed, has more data, um, perhaps also has jargon because the policymaker or that target audience could understand that, grasp that in a moment for them. It really is who uses it, for what end, and are you clear about that purpose or not?
Makes sense to a great extent. But I mean, campaigns is also a form of content and awareness. And you have a rich experience working across campaigns. Um, what do you think separates a good awareness campaign from a one that actually, drives behavior change? Maybe we can have your insights on that as well.
Yes. So for context, I have not worked on social SBCC, social
Mm.
behavior change campaigns. I think what a lot of organizations tend to miss, and a lot of people also tend to miss, they tend to club communications as this one big abstract thing, which has little or to no value. That's not really the case. If you come down to it, we are also communicating here.
Right.
Uh, Social media is just a tool that you use to reach many, many more people, to disseminate many, many more ideas. But that does not mean that one tool is better or not better, or the value of that tool in itself is not, it's not there. So that's one point that I want to make. SPCC, similarly, social and behavior change communication is an end. It's an outcome that you would want. Um, it is perfectly okay to run a campaign just for visibility, just for the fact, and in fact, in many cases, visibility is the first step to doing anything else. I will not take a step or make an action if I am not 100% aware of what it is, because it doesn't relate to me, or it doesn't seem like something that I can prioritize, I want to prioritize, right? So which is why I feel in my words, it's a continuum. So you start with visibility, you build up that kind of awareness, and then you slowly move to messaging, to tactics that are more detailed, that can actually elicit the kind of social change in attitudes, change in perception that you would want from your program.
Thank you, Avantika. I mean, that's a very practical perspective to start today's conversation with. I'll shift to Ankita. Ankita, what is one practical way of communicating in which you feel a person who is communicating minimizes the chances of having a communicator's bias?
I don't think there's like just one particular way that we can reduce that bias in our communication, but I can suggest a few like for this conversation, particularly in terms of storytelling. When it comes to reducing the bias, I think one of the prime things I think people often take with them on ground is the nature of saying, like, that there are some outputs in your documents that you have mentioned, and when you go on ground, you just try, when you're communicating or you're talking to the beneficiary, you have that already in your mind. So when you're talking, you just oftentimes we don't realize that we are pushing that output itself from the mouth of the beneficiary rather than taking the real conversation out. आपके साथ for example you like आपके साथ ये particular intervention हुई है, हाँ जी हुई है, आपने इसमें बेनिफिट लिया है, हाँ जी लिया है, अच्छा आपको ये मदद मिली, हाँ जी मिली है. You will not really spend time to like just 15 minutes of like that interaction, acquaintance building. Oftentimes that leads to a narrative which is very like like it solves the purpose of the organization's tone, but oftentimes misses on the real engagement or the real story that you might have got if you were trying to really like have a conversation with that person. That is something which I've often observed, that people take that on ground. So we have to really understand what purpose are we really solving, who are we focusing on in our stories. Is that the organization or the community? So one thing is that, and like besides that, I think with that, keeping that in mind, what I try to do is that whenever such as just Avantika mentioned, that jargon is very good for donors, but then when it comes to community or like those kind of storytelling, I would like to really know that if I take back that story to the community with that particular wording, will they really connect with it, or they'll like that's one question that I think we should keep in mind. Ki if I've developed the story, now if I take it back to the person who's it about, will they be really able to connect with it? So I think in that term, I really feel that jargon and words can be simplified, and they can really be like you can just really like try to gauge on the words that the community really use or describes. Oftentimes in like climate or these technical scientific terms, we like just give up on translations, saying that it cannot be like translated into the language that the community will understand. But you never know, they have terms. I do not really have a specific example in climate change, but one example that I can give you is that while I was working for a telemedicine work, telemedicine center, where you were trying to give consultations to patients online, and they had a center. None of them were calling it a telemedicine center. They were all called it TV wala doctor, and none of them knew that the person standing there is not the doctor. They are the nurse, they're just assistants, but for them they are the doctors. So you have to bring in that sort of emotion and that sort of engagement in your storytelling, that you are reducing the jargon. You can even share it with the donors at the same time, and it becomes emotionally and real in terms of that conversation, and we can really avoid that kind of biases that we take with ourselves. So these are only two, I think, ways I feel like you can really incorporate those real elements in your story.
True. The emotion part of storytelling. I mean, today we see that, the stories are actually very romanticized and are often simplified as well. You work a lot with communities on ground, and I mean, in amidst all of this romanticization of stories, how do you ensure that your stories are like authentic and still emotionally engaging in that way?
In that sense, as I mentioned, like you just really add a few elements which are of really truly your like indicator of your community being engaged with your intervention. So you take it back. So you take it along with you when you're on ground and you're talking to them, make those words, note those simple words that they are using, and you really take that conversation back and emotionally you connect with them. Romanticization, I've seen a lot happening. Like it's especially like lately, I was having a very interesting conversation with a few of my colleagues, that for a very long time, if you notice that women are, especially women, when it comes to romanticizing, and also most interventions include women as their protagonist, and we try to like very rarely you'll see a man being the protagonist of the story. A lot of it goes back to that women are the ones who are available when you're going on ground. You're the ones you're engaging with. But at the same time, over the years, I've realized, while I've been the person doing the same thing, romanticizing their stories oftentimes, like you make them the burden carrier of everything. Like they're already under so much like responsibilities and everything, and then you release a story saying heroes from the ground, and they are the
There's the
ones,
woman.
the heroes of the community are the women, and then maximum you'll change that word hero because it's a woman, and then you'll still share that story, but oftentimes you don't realize we're bringing back the burden on them again.
True, true.
And that kind of romanticization is not helping.
Mm.
It's just increasing the burden again. We expect then that the story, the narrative, when it goes out, we make more expectations. Now the story is out. Now we want more women like that. We want more women who, like, it's nice that they are volunteering. They want that. They are in. Seeking that kind of recognition that they might not have received at home for the work that they do. But at the same time, I think the story should highlight their fears, their struggles, why they wanted, why they really wanted to volunteer, rather than just simply saying that she's the hero of our work. She did this, she brought that change to the community. So all those kind of conversations. Even I had one conversation when I was in project for a air pollution work in Varanasi. And when we went on ground, all the people that we were interviewing or made to interview were women. So all of them, like, these are the people you should talk to. They're already fighting for domestic violence and everything. So they become your center again for air pollution also. Like, talk to them and they'll bring you the narrative, and they'll bring you the challenges. And same with family planning, same with every other topic that you see. So I think that is the point, which is like the romanticizing happens a lot. I don't want every time a woman to carry another burden in the story.
Mm.
So let's share that burden. We hold our narratives hold power, so we can move a little towards male and see what they are doing. And like maybe in narratives, and while we are glorifying the work, maybe they will also come in. They will also pitch in more, and then we don't put all the burdens back again on women. So that is one opinion that I hold in terms of romanticizing of stories. And then especially like we're coming to the language part of it, you often see people titling their stories like from rags to riches. This person has moved this much in the scale, and then this. Let's not have that kind of savior complex, no, like this happened and this whole life changed. I think where these are the subtle changes in our narratives which can bring the real story back on ground. That person might have had a small livelihood, they got a change there, something that you helped that person with farming, or that person was not really good with some climate was problem with that climate issue was a problem with their work, and you supported. That's the language. And oftentimes I see that becomes like heroic. Oh, this is the biggest change that happened. But like bringing the reality on ground back to the narratives, I think that will automatically do a very do good to the reputation of the people working, the organization working. So yeah, that's about it, about romanticizing stories.
From romanticization, I mean, you have been on ground for a very long time. Is there any particular personal moment behind the camera that completely, changed the idea of an impact for you? I would like
I
to know.
think, yeah, I can share two very small moments. Like both, one will show you like why the impact was maybe not targeting the right people in front of the camera, and you'll see the other one where the impact was so great that you don't even have to record it on camera. So two kinds. I was recording one shot in I think Bareilly. And Bareilly, when we went there and we were recording a interview of a widow woman who received pension, she received the help. She needed that. She had no documentation and all those things. So she was like a very good story for us, like a woman who received the help she needed. Right above that woman's house, a few stairs up, there were three old ladies living in a very small, tiny, dingy room. And I think that's where I felt like they were asking me, what is this about? Why are you recording this interview? He said, we are trying to gauge the stories of people who have not received help, and they have documentational issues, and they really need social security schemes to support them. They're like, we also need it. We don't have any Aadhaar card, and every time we go to a government office, they send us back because we don't have any proper documentation, and we also really need it. So, like, just makes you feel ki there's a little more help, a little upstairs, and they were paying rent to the lady downstairs, like, so in those 2,000 rupees salary that they had monthly, and they were very old ladies, like 80 years and alone, and they all were trying to support each other. So I think that was the moment where I felt like the narratives could shift a little, like we try to gauge a little more into the field research that we do, the narratives we take from ground to actually support the people who really want it. Another case is in Sonipat when I was trying to gauge a story for a woman who received help through a self-help group they created.
SHGs, yeah.
SHGs, and she lost her husband during the COVID-19 pandemic, and she had to teach two of her children. They send them to school, and the impact was so good, like that she was able to get back on her feet, and that was the story we were trying to capture. And when we were trying to get that story on camera, I asked her a few questions, and then while she was giving me answers, we got a good interview, very good story, real, nobody was telling her what to say or praise the organization, but at the same time, she started crying while narrating that story. And that was the time I have to also know that I have to shut down this camera right now. Like, this is not I want on my video
Right.
footage, because I really need to support her right now. And like, these are the two kind of moments where I really like change my perspective on all the storytelling and the things that we do on ground. And it still stays with me that oftentimes you don't really have to push for the real stories.
Of course. I mean, that's a very powerful on-ground reflection. And unless you are on ground, you do not get to know such stories. So that's very enriching to know. Thank you so much. I'll shift to Nayanika. She has also been working at the intersection of community and conservation, sorry. And Nayanika, you have worked a lot with the indigenous communities, and we all know by now that they hold deep ecological, knowledge, the communities. And still they are very hesitant when it comes to, comes to be in front of a camera. So how do you build that trust among those communities so that people can, share knowledge freely?
So working with the indigenous communities is, I mean, it's a great plus that you get to witness so many cultures, from the ground, and especially my region being the Northeast India, I get to meet a lot of those tribal communities, and it's so interesting that their cultural aspects are so distinct from each other, and it's so rich that we often, fail to sort of represent to a wider audience on the diversity and the kind of content that can actually generate from this region when we talk about ecological wisdom of the communities and of that sort. So I mean, the first solution is that we go with a deep sense of respect to the culture. We of course, it starts with taking consent and everything about, taking their stories and sort of highlighting it for a global audience. But the trust factor comes in from the point of presence and consistency. So it's about how we go to the field, spend time with the communities, share maybe a meal or two, take a walk with them around the forest and the farms where they practice agroforestry. And oftentimes we also need like a youth mobilizer on ground who is from the community itself, because from that person we of course receive a lot of help when we want to penetrate into the deep
The
forest to sort of
representation part.
understand, yeah, their relationship with their nature, their lives and livelihood. So the trust factor, I mean, that building of trust process is not like a short term this thing, but it does take a lot of time. But it's one key aspect is also acknowledgement. So I think as people from the communications field, it is imperative that we create platforms where they are acknowledged. And from the Balipara Foundation, we do an annual event called the Balipara Foundation Awards, and for that particular event, we do a lot of field visits and sites, and we try to gather stories. And it's interesting how all these people come up with things that they have been doing for generations altogether. For example, I can bring in one story about a person from Meghalaya who is restoring all the living root, bridges. Yeah, he's from a place called Pinursla. And he took us around, his village, made us meet a lot of his fellows. And there were so many great stories that were not really represented in the media. So to build the trust and to actually sort of hold relevance in their stories, it is a process that we have to sort of take care of. But the whole idea is that there is presence and consistency, and that there is acknowledgement. But it does come, the trust does build in with time.
Right. Yeah, the acknowledgement also helps with that. But
Correct.
there is a lot of decolonization of conservation communication over time. So the idea is to keep it, more circular. How do we ensure that communication in conservation, is less extractive, more circular? These actual heroes get that recognition and, own that final output.
Right. That's a great question, yet a little complex. But yeah, one is when we are trying to build a narrative, it is important that we do not build the narrative for them, but rather sit and co-create with them. So when we are maybe writing a story about how they perceive nature, their relationship with nature, how do they understand ecology, how do they understand nature nomics, that how do we derive economy and development from the point of conservation. That's so it starts with co-creating spaces for stories. Okay, one is that, and also the other is that when we think about the kind of outputs or returns that we can give back to the community through the wider storytelling that we do, it is when we think about taking like a photo stories or a video or a report that we seemingly try to make very attractive, it is important that it is based on grounded facts. We just talked about romanticizing stories. It is okay to romanticize as long as we are not diluting the whole narrative. That's one idea of it. Also, it comes down to capacity building also. So instead of just sort of telling the stories or bringing in forms of story dissemination, it is important that when we try to take a story from the local to the global level, it is important that the stories are said or narrated or sort of documented by the community people itself. So then it is not that we are the people stepping in to sort of help them take their stories to the world, but they are so the whole idea about how they are helping conservation stories in the Northeast, the whole idea shifts to how they are leading the change. And it's not like how we are helping them lead the change. I think that's where the yeah
Yeah.
like story dissemination, that technicality comes in.
Co-creation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
co-creation.
whenever we take these stories from local to global, how do we ensure that we do not lose out on the authenticity part of it from a communication perspective?
Yeah. So it's a circular model that sometimes we often have to. So maybe a story is, being built around depicting a woman, her struggles, and how through, agroforestry or habitat restoration or her engagement with the nature, like how it has helped her, build up her own life and come out of the poverty. Stories, there are many like this from the field, but to not lose the authenticity. That's the central part. But how do we ensure that it is through the circular model that we take back to the story to them? And then they should also be knowing that this is my story, which is being taken to a global audience, and that there is representation from her side, that her voice. So we give them the liberty to speak in their own language, and we subtitle it when we do our videos and content creation. So it's important that these stories come out from their own mouth and through their own hands, if they write. So that because when the language changes, it does happen that the whole messaging also sometimes goes through a little bit of alteration, and we do not want that. So it is important that we overcome the language barrier. It's time, because I don't think that diversity is a hindrance when when it's about a particular story being, viral or out on the media, and for more people to know about how, conservation is from the grassroots itself. So the diversity point to be respected comes in with how we include the communities in sort of, driving a particular narrative about their conservation ideas. Yeah.
So much, Nayanika. I mean, there are very thoughtful points on ethics and best representation of communities in storytelling. Thank you so much. I'll move on to Jananni. Jananni, you have led multiple campaigns which connect people to, all social issues. But when we talk about climate change, which often feels an abstract concept, what do you think makes a story click with the audiences?
I agree with you. It's such a broad concept, and communications in itself as a field is also so broad, and there are so many layers to unpack. And then when we're trying to talk about climate and energy and all the other aspects which are attached to it, what does it really come down to? From my experience, I feel that it comes down to how we bring out the human element of these initiatives and how we showcase the impact that it is bringing for the people that it is connected to. I feel that storytelling really plays a very important role here. It's about, as my other fellow panelists have spoken about, how it's really important to understand the stakeholders' perspective. Is that when we go to the field and when we speak to them, it's not simply just about communicating the program that is providing benefits to them, or about how it is impacting them, or how difficult or how easy their life is, but it is more about involving them in the entire process, bringing out their perspectives, bringing out the really learning from the traditional knowledge that they carry, and being able to highlight that using several storytelling tactics and strategies which we could possibly implement. Um, and the idea also is to be able to showcase that the impact of climate change and climate action is not something which is far away in the future or which is somewhere in the past, but that it is happening right now. So it becomes even more important to be able to connect um, connect these everyday happenings with everyday impact, so that not only are we able to reach that larger audience and inform them and make them more aware about this, but also how do we simplify this for communities and for populations who are actually really impacted by this. I think one more point which is very important is to not stick to sort of doomsday messaging. It was something which was useful and helpful maybe a decade back or earlier than that. And it really did help in creating that sort of awareness about climate change. But now, but what that causes it to do is that it sort of disillusions people from actually taking action and actually wanting to know more about the impact of climate change, and it sort of disengages them. So how do you then turn that sort of doomsday messaging into more hopeful messaging and make people understand that certain actions, certain initiatives, it's if people get involved in them, or if policymakers get involved in them, that this is the kind of positive impact that it will have. So yeah, so I mean, focusing on humans, focusing on the impact quotient of it, and also being really, I wouldn't say being, like very not to sugarcoat it, but of course also to uh, to really make your narrative in a way that people don't get disillusioned by it either.
Right. I mean, when we talk about doomsday messaging, the idea of climate change usually leans on, melting ice, cracked soils. I mean, if we have to reinvent that visual language of climate change in India, what would you suggest?
I think visuals itself are so important, and I feel that it is such a underused and understated form of communication. It's really important to utilize visuals in a way, because visuals cut across. You could come from a different geographical background, you could come from a different language background, but the correct and the an effective usage of visuals could really make that impact that you need to make. So in that sense, photographs, videos, iconology, all of these utilized in a very efficient way could make such a difference. So like you said, how if we are talking about melting ice caps, then what is it that we could possibly be talking about in place of melting ice cap? If we're saying that climate change is causing melting ice, so what is a solution within a local context that can be showcased visually? So if it's in India, and if we're say talking about hilly areas where landslides have become a very common occurrence, then how can we visually showcase that improved architecture, improved mitigation efforts? For example, just off the top of my mind, showcasing how a community is using rainwater harvesting as something which they are utilizing to tackle the impacts, the everyday impact of climate change. Or how, for example, how a community is utilizing, is respecting and utilizing its surroundings. So, for example, mangroves or anywhere where there are forests, and they are implementing their own traditional knowledge and they're learning from it, rather than going to them and telling them that this is how you should be doing it. So a lot of nuances, and really trying to bring in visuals which don't just plainly show that, okay, there's this program and ye community hai, and then this is the impact that has been done to them through this program, but rather also involving them, letting them speak their heart out. And I think, as Ankita had mentioned, that you just need to take out that bit of time with them and really understand that what is it that they want to speak about. It's easy to go and tell them that, Acha, we will ask you these questions and you please tell us that this is the benefit that you got out of it. But then, I mean, what's more to it? What if there is more to it than just benefits for them? I remember a long back, I was part of this project, and we did our shoot and everything, and then the camera is off and everything, and then he's actually the beneficiary actually starts speaking, and he's like, हाँ सब अच्छा है, but then फिर ये problem हो जाता है इसके साथ, and then nobody really comes to fix this. It takes 4-5 days for somebody to come and fix the system. Yeah, it brought us benefits, but then what beyond it? I mean, there's like the end-to-end sustainability of that product is possibly not there, and that is only coming out after the camera switches off. So then it's okay to not be able to capture that on camera for organizational purposes. It's understandable, but then as communicators, when we are on the field, I think it's our responsibility as well to take that feedback and go back to our internal teams, and let them know that, okay, yeah, this is what came out of it. I mean, I'm deviating a bit from the main question here, but it's just a thought which just came to me. But yeah, I mean, I really think we need to prioritize the usage of visuals to really engage people, because we've seen in our monitoring and in our analysis also that typically, if we have to look at engagement and impact, whenever we use visuals in our communications, it always performs better. So there are numbers to support that, that people actually sit down and watch visuals rather than just reading text, long form text or short form text. So and connecting that to your earlier question about short form content, I think that's where all of these formats like reels and shorts and all really help, because they're at least giving you they're at least giving you a very quick view of how things are and how can they be looked at. So yeah, I think that it's very, very important to use visuals in the current context, especially. Yeah.
Right, right. Just like you said, the engagement part. When it comes to communication, we majorly focus on the reach, the engagement to understand the messaging. But how do we ensure when the issue is about understanding climate change, how do we ensure that we have actually, simplified those tricky jargons to a layman's language successfully? How do we ensure that?
Um, so again, like engagement and engagement and reach and all are again is technical language for us as
Right.
communicators. That is something which is relevant to our day-to-day work, which we need to track so that we know how to improve on our communication and create better impact. But when we talk about that large scale measurement of what the impact of our communications has been, how do we do that? I think it's sort of a long term process, but it's more about monitoring how behaviors are changing. I'm not an expert on behavior change, but um, I think it's a two-way street. Is that one is where we are implementing our own tactics and our own strategies of how we think something should be best communicated, but also learning from the audience by speaking to them, learning from our stakeholders by speaking to them, and understanding that, okay, this is what we think the strategy should be. And we implement it, we see what the numbers are, but then we also understand that behaviorally, when somebody is seeing a certain video, then what do they feel from it? What do they understand from it? So, and this is audience to bahut, it's like a very big concept, audience in itself, and there are so many different audience groups that we have.
It's scattered.
Yeah, but an immediate stakeholder group that you can reach out to is your own internal stakeholder group, which is your own colleagues or your own immediate partners of the organization. That is one very good group of people to really connect with and try to understand their perspective. And that really helps in improving the efficiency and the impact of all of these campaigns. And I think yeah, I mean mainly it's about understanding how it's changing behavior and how it's and if there is any sort of over time large scale policy impact. And it's all about maintaining consistency at the end of the day. That if you want to build a narrative, so in my current organization, we've been, it's a relatively new organization, and we've been working for the past 3.5 years to build a very strong narrative on clean energy transition in India and Southeast Asia. So it's a lot of um, it's a lot of consistent efforts to build that narrative through media, social media, and really collaborating with partners and with internal stakeholders to understand what is it that would work best.
Internal stakeholders are a good litmus test in that way to know what's working and not working. But that's really insightful, how to build things on emotion, evidence, and BTS, which you had already. Thank you so much for sharing insights on that. Paridhi, we have some questions for you as well. Your work often brings a humanitarian side of climate communication. But climate stories are very emotionally heavy. There are talks about loss, displacement, in fact, floods. How do you tell those stories to inspire action and, not despair?
So, when we are working on the stories, we have to do a lot of research, and facts are really important, and science gives you facts. So, stating facts in a story is really important. But then, as you said, when you are trying to use the element of storytelling, our agenda is that we just not focus on the sadness or the despair and the crisis that has happened. But there is another side of the story, which is on adaptability of the local communities who have come out of that problem together, supporting each other. So I try to build the stories on honesty and hope. Hope which the local communities get together and build up, because they have been they are living in that landscape since ever, and they have that respect for each other and for the climate and the ecosystem. So when you build the stories on resilience, on solutions rather than problems, there becomes a new touch to a story. And then I would say, so the science, the facts will actually state the facts, and then the storytelling will give you the heartbeat to the story. And then with the storytelling, it will help you feel. And when you feel, you are naturally inspired to take action. Yeah.
The idea of hope, I think that gives a good, push to act on those things. You have worked across Himalayas and arid ecosystems, and there are very different environments, and the landscape are different, but the people are also very different. Is there any particular way in the communities respond to the climate change, which is different for each, landscape?
There's not much difference. Obviously, the landscapes are different. The
Hmm.
challenges, the elevation, the landscape problems are completely different. In Himalayan landscapes, mostly people talk about climate disasters, landslides that are happening. And in arid landscapes, for example, in Rajasthan and Haryana, they mostly talk about heat waves and water scarcity and water shortage, or groundwater toxicity, or water that there's no water. So I mean the challenges are different, but the people how people respond to it, I think it's kind of similar, because when we are talking about people's approach with nature, there is a concept called nature worship, or another terms we call animism. And I have researched a lot about it, and I try to integrate animism in my human interest stories, in my documentaries. So when these people, they have an emotional bond with the landscapes, with the trees, with the rivers and the waters. They have these sacred groves. We have heard a lot about sacred groves. And
Hmm.
they preach the landscapes. For example, in northeast, they preach Kanchenjunga landscape, and they have various gods. So when they are preaching it, they naturally conserve it. And so that is kind of similar. There are sacred groves both ways. The traditions are different, but the approach is similar. Now, what is to remember from the approach of the communities with nature is that we should also try and build a relationship, because climate change, biodiversity losses, these are not just events. These are like part of us, and we are all connected to it. We are part of it. That is the most important part that we are supposed to understand. And when we understand that we understand from this indigenous knowledge that is with the local communities, we naturally will have that respect that they have, and we would uh, be doing the same that they are doing.
I mean, you rightly mentioned about climate change, the events. When the mainstream media actually covers them, they usually talk about floods, heat waves, something like that, which reflects that, climate change is something which happens like a one-off event. But we all know that climate change is an ongoing story, a very continuous thing. What do you think media can do differently to reflect on that, continuity of climate change so that people act on that?
I mean, yes, media, they do report stories on climate change, and some of them are, when I read them, they are really great. They're reported really well, but some
Yeah.
of them are not. That we have to understand, because they do not understand how what is climate change and how it is connected to a landscape. Because we are not working in silos. It's not an isolated phenomena. Everything is connected to each other. Wildlife species, the people, the culture, and climate phenomena, whatever is happening. And if there is a disturbance in any of these sections, there is a ripple phenomena and everything gets disturbed. So when I have also worked as a journalist and I have worked mostly on wildlife and climate stories. And what I do is I spend time with the communities. I spend a lot of time on the story and try to have different perspectives. So when there are different perspectives to a story, there is facts and figures that is easy to report, that you get from the scientists, that you get from the papers. But there is a different side that is lying with the communities. And when you try to connect all the dots and you try to evolve a relationship, then I think the story that arrives, a story, the output that we have is very interesting, and the audience is also able to connect with it, because we are not just reporting an event, you're not just reporting a phenomena, you are uh, stating a story that has all the dimensions to it, and then ultimately you are inspiring the audience to drive action.
Thank you, Paridhi. I mean, I get that emotions are the core of storytelling. That's very insightful. Thank you so much. Before we wrap all of the today's reflections, let's have like a common reflection round, where you all can volunteer to answer. So please feel free. My first question would be for everyone in this panel: do you think communication is still treated as a soft part of climate change, or have we truly been recognized as something which can drive climate change? I mean, in a positive, drive climate action actually.
Yeah, I mean, some to some extent, communication is still considered as a soft part, but to understand that communication and storytelling is actually a bridge. I see it as a bridge, which is extremely important between science and the civil society. And as I said, the science is giving you facts. It is reports, which is very important. And I was also a scientist at some point of my time, but I transitioned into communication so that we could reach a wider audience. So yes, somewhere that it's still there, but we are slowly evolving and things are really improving, and people are accepting communicators, and it's the scenario has pretty changed. Yes.
True. Um, Avantika, you were saying something.
Quite agree with what Paridhi is saying. I actually am quite optimistic. When I started out my career, communications was seen as a service and support function in India. But that has changed to a certain degree, and that's a very good change to have. Actually, people are also now, and especially organizations, are now sort of focusing in on the fact that communications is a strategic opportunity for them. And it's not just to be presented in front of donors, or to be presented at high level conferences. No. It is a core tenet of how the organization appears outside to many of its stakeholders. And by stakeholders, again, jargon here. But by stakeholders, I mean it could be policymakers, it could be businesses, it could be the public as well, and it could also be local communities. And I think slowly that recognition and leadership is has come to a great
Mhm.
extent. What I feel can still be improved is a funding for pure communications still is not something that I see as as a priority, and that is sort of I think a gap that needs to be filled, and filled in fast. The one thing that I'm not entirely sure we've covered in this conversation is the fact that yes, communications is all about relatability. It's about telling the stories. It's about bringing the voices and lifting the voices from the ground. But equally, communications is also about consensus building. It's about in a room full of the same kind of people, uh, how do you make sure that they see eye to eye and then they understand the urgency of that action, of the issue at hand? And that can't just be done by data, because at the end of the day we are all humans,
Hmm.
and we operate a certain way, and one-to-one connections or conversations in that sense are super critical to convince us to do it, just about anything. So I feel that that's where one big gap does lie, where funding for communications, just pure communications, is still something that is not a priority. Programmatically, you can have programs that are more technical programs, and then there is one component of communications inbuilt there. But that sort of just leaves very sort of that restricts communicators to a certain degree, that restricts the kind of communications you can do and the needs of the communication. So it's not just what the organization or what we want to do, but rather what is required. So when you go to a doctor, they sort of also look at symptoms, right? And they tell you, okay, this is what I diagnose you with. And I think we must start now looking at communications as much as a science, and a skilled based profession, than an art of, you're all creative people, you can story tell, position the camera here, position the camera there, uh, put out a social media post, because comms is much, much beyond that now.
Right. Well, that's also behavior change we need towards communication in particular. Does someone would like to add to Avantika's reflection on that? Ankita? Yeah.
I really agree with the fellow panelists that that it is changing, that we are having more and more focus coming towards communication, but I think it's specifically driven with the lens of what they see digital marketing as. So it's quite they've confused the two. Like when it comes to like it isn't like that there was no specific categories before. There were categories before as well, and there were, I can refer to campaigns from 20, 30-year old where there was special behavior change communication specialist hired for creating multimedia, which was really based on theories and psychological theories and impacts and a lot of things that we call are like taking away out the positive change from the community, has a full theory on it. Positive deviance, it's called like all those things, they do exist, but at the same time recognition for it has been very limited. And over time, I do see a change. I do see that there are more and more requirements for communication roles, but they fail to bifurcate between the two kind of specialists that you need. One is a marketing one. One is that like the ones coming doing communications for you, like all the public relation, your storytelling, and your everything, which is organization with the lens of promoting the work of the organization. At the same time, the campaign people who are like really on ground bringing the change, come doing the community engagement, they go out of that lens. They are like usually merged together. We want this one individual to do everything for us. So
Oh.
that has happened, that is still happening a lot, and you will see a like a sort of like a lot of job descriptions floating on online, that they want SBC also, they want organization communication also, they want everything in one person. So I think that's where we tend to under appreciate the work that communication people can do, and there are specialists and people who have their specific expertise in areas. We all here have a very different expertise here, and I think we all come under a similar role name, and where I think we are yet to still make sure that communication becomes a very more strategic and more expertise oriented field than it is now at the moment. Although we have come a long way to make sure we are having more and more dialogue, we are getting involved with more trendy things, reels, short form content, and everything. We're bringing more people in, but at the
Yeah.
same time, we are forgetting to draw a line of expertise with that happening.
Thank you so much, Ankita. That's a great reflection. Brings me to my next question from that only. Social media, a platform which is the loudest platform for climate communication, but we also call it the noisiest one. There are memes, there are reels, there are GIFs, everything. But and this is going to shape the next generation's idea about climate change. Do you feel that being viral will spread that understanding?
Social media has for sure transformed, climate communications. It has made it very democratic, yet it has also diluted the climate consciousness to a great level. Being, I mean, a reel or something going viral is great. It helps fetch attention, but we also need to be very mindful about what's going out of the door. Does that particular content really have substance? It does manage to catch one's attention, that we pause a particular reel for a few seconds because it's visually very pleasing and appealing. But have you been able to make that person, I mean the viewer, go beyond that, just scrolling a particular reel to actually maybe make him or her rethink about his or her relationship with the nature? That's a point that we should be considerably thinking about. Also said virality is, for me it is a tool but not the goal. um,
Hmm.
Sometimes we do create content showing like rolling hills of the eastern Himalayas, but I think it's important that we also show the real visuals that holds the story. For example, there's a place here in northeast, in it's called the Longding district in Arunachal. When you run, maybe just like we do have like a lot of aerial shots of the forest flourishing and all of that, but when we go to the ground and we actually take our cameras and we try to record what's in there, we see that a lot of the plantations are infested with insects. There's a lot of I mean, the soil is losing its fertility. There is monoculture, but there's not like
Hmm.
multiple species growing in a particular hotspot. So we cannot sugarcoat um,
The
the
realities.
reality. We have to let it yeah, go out of our windows just as it is. So yeah, I mean, social media is great, but it also depends on how we use it.
Right, right. Anyone would like to add to Nayanika's reflection on that?
Also important to make sure how credible your sources are, and I mean, it's good to capture attention, but it's also about what is the thought that you're leaving them with. So that end-to-end planning that you have to do on the back end is really important.
Yeah.
And you can't just be like, okay, I'll just talk about why solar power is important, but you have to think about what is it that they take away from this, what is it that they think about it in the long term or from a community perspective. Um, so uh, so then, and how do you build upon it? It's not you social media virality, okay, it can happen through one video, but then that consistency factor in social media is very important, that just one video doesn't do, or just one creative post doesn't do the work. It has to be a series, or it has to be a campaign of sorts, which will establish a certain subject or a certain topic in a comprehensive manner, but in bite-sized content. So I feel that that's very important. The way you do it and the planning that you put into it is extremely important.
Having multiple bite-sized content can help, believe. Thank you, Janani, and thanks, Nayanika, for that reflection. Ankita, I saw your hand raised, so I think you want to add to
Well,
that, I guess.
Janani sort of like gathered like the thoughts that I was trying to share, but there's just a little more to it. While we are just sharing these kind of content with our audiences, and we know that they're watching that kind of footage, our field engagement is happening, the community engagement is happening. I think we cannot really leave the actual on ground engagement still. If your reel goes viral, it's great, you're generating awareness, it's a very good thing, you were able to spread the message, but
Mm.
it cannot ensure understanding. in the
Exactly.
audience. It is like you left the message. It's great, but if you are not having a dialogue with them on ground, it's just another scroll because we are so bombarded with the content, and I am sure
Mm.
there are so many interesting reels for them to watch. They'll forget about it in some time.
There's a lot of fatigue around all of this.
Yes,
So yeah.
and we cannot really leave the traditional methods behind. While we are
Mm.
moving towards really good digital marketing strategies, and we are reaching through them through their platforms they are on constantly, we cannot really leave behind the role that the traditional methods of focus group discussions or those kind of community engagement holds. As someone said, that field assistants are really important in that journey of yours. Like, I mean, somebody mentioned about that. Then field assistants, you
Mm.
still have to go back to them, even with your digital strategy. Just go back and then like ensure that the message was discussed later in the targeted community that you were trying to reach to. Your audience range is very vast, and you don't even know your intervention was like in that focused area, it went to that focused area or not, that where your organization is. So you have to really go back again on the ground. I think that's something that I feel virality of a reel is really great, but then
Yeah.
go back.
The understanding cannot be compromised.
Yes, go back and talk to them again. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Didn't
Reflect
you?
on that.
Yeah. Just talk.
Yeah.
You don't have to like really question them. Just talk.
So it comes to my last question of this final round, and there is no exclusion from this. Everyone has to give in their answer to that. One climate word or phrase you feel is being overused and you would like to replace that. I can go first. I would say I can replace net zero with fair zero, more inclusive in terms. So you can also give a shot to this. Who wants to go first? I'm in second now.
Um, so I wanted to add, I mean, we have been using the word climate crisis all the time in the
Yeah.
stories. Now, what does it signify? It creates fear among the audience and communities. And that's not what our agenda is. We are trying to create awareness and inspire action. So I think probably we can use the term climate responsibility, and that
Second word.
is like a supportive term, and it
Hmm.
helps you to inspire and drive action. Yeah.
Thank you, Paridhi. Who's going next?
Because Paridhi spoke about climate crisis, I'll also come in, and because for me that's exactly the word that I would also pick. These two words, climate crisis, have been overused. And I think been done to that. Really, that moment of thinking of climate change as a doomsday scenario uh, does not quite help in public narrative building and messaging. There are more constructive and better ways of presenting climate change, especially now. If you see, and if I may, if you look at how countries are responding, at least some countries are responding to climate change, climate action, you can see that it is also an opportunity. I mean, it's very very counterintuitive, but the phase that we are in is also an opportunity, and I think that needs to be presented more and more for to convince people that this is indeed something that we need to act on. This is not a lost battle or not a lost cause.
There's still hope. A lot of hope. Yeah. Thank you, Avantika. Um, who's coming next? Jananni, please.
There's something very closely related to the work that I'm doing. I work in energy, so I feel that there is this concept of calling it a just energy transition, and I feel that that's a bit of a skewed perspective because just could mean that you want everybody to have similar levels or similar kinds of impact or equal kinds of impact of clean energy transition. And I feel that that is not really possible because different communities, different geographies face different kinds of impact, and the way the impact reaches to them is also very, very different. So I think instead of, and this is something that we use on a daily basis in our work also, is that feel that it could be changed to equitable energy transition or inclusive energy transition, where you're really where you're focusing more on really how each community is impacted by it, and how what kind of energy transition are we taking to them, and to make it more inclusive, to make it more relatable to them, so that they can themselves be involved in it, and they can be made the owners of it, the sort of the torchbearers of the energy transition themselves. So I think that's something which is quite relevant. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you, Jananni. Ankita, please.
Since I've been talking a lot about bringing the focus on communities and everything, it's one of the observation that I have is that crime, whenever we talk about climate, we are talking about like there is like something going wrong, as they were saying, crisis. So something is going wrong, something is happening with the earth, and this is a like, and like why don't we change the narrative and build it, bring it back to people itself, like this is you who's going to get affected, this is you who's going to, like this is there, this is already there, like how दिक्कतें आ सकती है, like whenever we talk about certain climate changes, but then the focus always remain on like very deadly images of climate change, and why not just like, everybody has covered that, I guess, here, that why
I think
not
a lot of
bring
vote has
those,
gone to the
bring the
crisis.
focus back on the small changes that we need to make, because climate change to me always seemed like a very big thing that needs a lot of action, like a very big action is needed when you're talking about climate change. And I am always unaware, like being a person, like if I have to work towards climate change, I was never given steps, like small tiny messages, like okay, do this today, do this today, it might help. Messages have, I think they existed when I was in school. After that I have stopped hearing those small tiny steps and messages. It was only left for me as a child, I guess. um, but I would
What's
really
the word you're
want
giving?
more new steps according to the climate changes, new messages, new actions that I should take, because recently there's like a whole protest that took place in India Gate, I guess we all know about it. But somewhere I feel they were very good at highlighting the boards and messaging that they had, like this is what we want, but nobody really knows what should we do. Like if we have to, if we are coming together collectively, what action should be taken? We can raise our voices, but where are we lacking in taking steps and actions? And that's where I feel we need to bring the narrative back to people, because a lot of things can be like, वो फैक्ट्री वहाँ चलती है, उससे pollution है, वो उधर है, उससे कुछ problem है, but then we ourselves are very helpless in terms of our own actions, and what should we do? That's where the messaging, I think, should move a bit, if we can do anything. I'm not sure people are here are climate experts and know better, but I
Yeah.
feel if there was something for me as an individual, or people as an individual, that can be done, would be really, really helpful.
So what word you're replacing
I
across all
am
of these words?
replacing Earth, like I'll be very like a cliche set. Earth is dying, forests are gone, and all those things. To let's protect each other. Let's help each other.
From trying to protect them. I see.
Let's
Thank you,
protect
Ankita.
ourselves also, because maybe that give them sense of responsibility. You are the ones who are going to get affected at the end.
So, I think we're left with Nayanika. Nayanika, what's your jargon?
Now, yeah, I think I agree with Ankita that
Yeah.
messaging. I mean, the words can be simpler. We've all talked about climate change, like climate emergency crisis. These are like heavy words, like doomsday coming, alert sort of. But I think, as somebody who's been working with the communities, we see that we are losing out on a lot of the community values, on what our ancestors, taught us and how they lived their lives. They were all in harmony with nature. So I think if we go back to a little on how they lived their lives and how they, held nature close to their hearts. I think that climate consciousness is just going to awaken in itself. So, would stop saying some, very common phrases like save the planet or save water. Rather, I would say, let's just go back to our basics and restore our relationship with nature. Yeah.
Save to restore, I guess. Thank you, Nayanika. Thank you, in fact, everyone for this engaging conversation. I think we have a clear understanding now that simplifying climate dialogue, it won't be about reducing any depth. It's about making it accessible. And that is when the people will understand the entire concept, can connect with it, and can connect and act accordingly. I think I'll pass on to Priyamvada, who can help us with the summary of today's webinar, the key points. Priyamvada, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Kamakshi. Thank you, panelists. It was a very, very interesting conversation to listen to. Kamakshi, if I may also offer a swap of terminology, maybe my offering is to just change the word climate change and say climate reality, because that is really a reality in the current times.
Thanks,
I think it would be quite difficult for me to summarize all of the diverse conversations we had, because the panelists really touched upon a wide, holistically all of the dimensions of their work. So really kudos to the great work that all of the communication professionals are doing in their realms of work. Just to pick up some cross-cutting messages that all the panelists said in their messages, and there was some overlap. I think there was a comment on how it is important to be present, consistent, and acknowledge the role of the community, and rather co-create the messages rather than create them, make them the creators or make them the leaders of the change rather than help them lead that particular change. So I think that was a very interesting and powerful statement. Very interesting, and all of the panelists agreed on this, that it's very important to bring in the science, the facts, the data in their communications, but then not to miss out on the human and cultural dimensions. Otherwise, the storytelling may not reach a wider audience. It might be easier to report science and facts, but it takes much more efforts to go to the ground and bring in the human side of the story or the phenomena that is happening. There was a lot of talk on the social media as a tool, and in the very beginning part of the conversation, Avantika, you really made it very clear that it is just a tool and not the entire communication strategy. So I think that is something that all of us, even non-communication people, should remember in designing projects or planning the communications on paper. I'll just then end with how it is very important to break the jargon at the grassroots level, and in fact make the funders also quite used to the broken up jargons, and just break away, just like we did it in the last round right now. So I'll end with the thought that we have some more better funding and much more recognition to the comms efforts that we have present here. So hopefully in the coming years, not just recognition, there is a lot more funding coming into the communications part of our projects. With that, I will take the opportunity to thank each and every one of the panelists here, all of the audience who have joined us live on LinkedIn, the entire team here. Thank you a lot, and we'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you.